الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. فقال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, the month of Dhul Hijjah is almost here, and whenever Hajj comes upon us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites those whom He wills. They go for Hajj, and we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the opportunity to go for Hajj, and for those that have been accepted for this year, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless their journey and accept from them and allow them to return home safely and to be of those who have an accepted Hajj. Ameen. But when we come upon the month of Hajj, one of the themes of Hajj is that of sacrifice. We're all looking around to see where we can do our udhiyah, our qurbani, where we can give our sacrifice, what animals should we purchase, how many, where to give it. And this idea of sacrifice, the backstory for it, is one that teaches us many lessons. We can draw many parallels from. And the idea and concept of sacrifice and sacrificing for none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what better example, what better story do we have than that of the blessed family of Khalilullah Ibrahim alayhi salam, where we find that time and time again, as a young boy, as a husband, as a father, and in old age, he has to sacrifice over and over again, thrown in the fire and kicked out of his homeland. He says, قال إني ذاهب إلى ربي سيهدين, that I will go towards my Lord. I will make hijrah. I will leave my home. I will sacrifice the place where I grew up, my father, my family, my people, and I will go and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide me. And then when he reaches in old age, time and time again, as a normal human being, he is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless him with a child. He says, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. O Allah, grant me a righteous child. Grant me a righteous child. And in old age, the scholars, they mention Ibrahim alayhi salam may have been in his late 80s. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with Ismail alayhi salam. But then what do we find? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then commands Ibrahim alayhi salam to take his wife Hajar, the mother of Ismail, with Ismail, who is still suckling as a baby, feeding off of his mother's milk, and to take them to a valley, biwadin ghayri dhi zar', there's no vegetation, no signs of life, nothing, and to leave them there, to sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And right then and there we find a beautiful example of sacrificing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, placing our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hajar alayhi salam, she simply asks Ibrahim alayhi salam, and this is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, that are you going to leave us here where there's nothing, there's no people, there's no signs of life, there's nothing here? And Ibrahim alayhi salam was silent. So then she asked, Allahu amaraka bihada? Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command you to do this? And Ibrahim alayhi salam, he answered, Na'am, yes. So then Hajar alayhi salam, she said, Idhan la yudayyu'una Allah, la yudayyu'una. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will not leave us alone. He will not leave us alone. Right? The sacrifice of a father, a husband, after 80 something years, into his late 80s, he's finally granted a child, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands him to take them to the valley of Bakka, to Mecca, where there's nothing at the time. And then just a few years later, right, we know from the story that Ibrahim alayhi salam used to go and visit Hajar and Ismail from time to make sure everything is okay, to make sure they have what they need, to check on Ismail, to raise him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِغُلَامٍ حَلِيمٍ, that after he made this dua, oh Allah, grant me a righteous child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with a boy who was halim, who was gentle, forbearing, patient. And some of the scholars say by the time he reached the age of somewhere between 7 and 13 years old, it says, فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعَهُ السَّعْيَ. Right? There's different interpretations of this. Was Ismail alayhi salam at the age of puberty, or was he at an age where he could walk and help his father and do work, or was he at an age where he was capable of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We just know that he was old enough to understand, to do some things on his own, to follow the guidance of his father alayhi salam. So when he reached that age, Ibrahim alayhi salam said to his son, قَالَ يَا بُنَيَّ إِنِّي أَرَى فِي الْمَنَامِ, that, oh my son, I saw in a dream. And it's narrated from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma that رُؤْيَا الْأَنْبِيَا فِي الْمَنَامِ وَحْيٌ, that the dreams, the visions that prophets, that they see in their dreams are wahi. It's revelation. أَنِّي أَذْبَحُكَ, I saw in my dream that I have to slaughter you, I have to sacrifice you. فَانْظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى, so what do you think? What do you think? And Ismail alayhi salam, being a blessed prophet, the son of a prophet who is Khalilullah, the close friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having been raised righteously, properly, by one of the greatest of creations, Ibrahim alayhi salam, what was his response? قال يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. He said, oh my father, do as you have been commanded and you will find me with those who are patient. A young boy has the awareness, has the taqwa, has the intelligence, the iman to tell his father, to understand that what you have been commanded to do is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I will be patient. So my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, there is nobody in history, the history of mankind, that will be tested greater than the prophets and the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alayhimus salatu wassalam. Nobody will be tested greater than them. And the greater the prophet, the greater the test. Nobody was tested worse than our beloved messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the test of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Isa and Musa and Nuh alayhimus salam, their tests were so great that we can't even fathom what it would be like to be in their shoes. Yet they sacrificed over and over again solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to ask ourselves, although we will not face these types of trials and tribulations to be asked to sacrifice in the same manner, what is it that we are willing to sacrifice? For whom are we willing to sacrifice? A parent is always willing to sacrifice for their child. Right? A father, a mother will do whatever they can for their children. They will go and work and they'll make sure that they're taking care of themselves and their families and providing for their children. And we find the example of a father having to sacrifice that very child that he would give everything up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what are we willing to sacrifice and for whom? The what is different from individual to individual, but for whom? At the very top, it's always going to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to see what it is that we need to sacrifice in order to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to obey Him and to follow His commandments the way they should be followed. Ibrahim alayhi salam, as a father, was giving up his child, as a husband and father together was giving up his wife and his child. Hajar alayhi salam had to give up her security, her comfort, possibly even finding sustenance for herself and her child. And Ismail alayhi salam, he was willing to give up his own life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we find that in the story of the sacrifice, when we do gain that confidence, that boost of iman, that certainty that I'm going to sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like in the story of the sacrifice of Ibrahim and Ismail alayhim as-salam, we find that shaitan will always come to us and try to deviate us, to try and get us off the straight path. Shaitan will come and try and deter us by either making our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala look undesirable, Look at what you're doing. How can you sacrifice your son? What kind of a God would ask you to put a knife to your son's throat? Or shaitan will come to us and make the vision of disobedience desirable towards us. He will make the haram look like something that is very desirable to us, something that we want to do even more. He will beautify those deeds, those misdeeds. So we have to realize that it's already hard enough for us to sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something easy, or else it would not be considered a sacrifice. It's already very difficult for us to do so. And then on top of that, we have our enemy, shaitan, who is trying to keep us away from this as much as possible, to keep us away from goodness, from obedience, to make sure we are entrenched in disobedience. And instead of gaining the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wants us to gain his anger, his wrath, his displeasure. So my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, when we go out on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that doesn't mean that we're going out and giving da'wah, we're going out and we're going to another country to learn about Islam. It's in our daily lives. Every single day of our lives we are setting out on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just because we woke up and in our hearts was La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, everything that we do, that we show of ourselves should be that of a Muslim. So every day we're going out on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to see what it is that we have to give up, what it is that we have to sacrifice for His sake. And when we do so, when we even make the intention and take that first step towards it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make that path easy for us. And He will make it so that He is near to us and closer to us. And we have to make sure that we stay away from the distractions of shaitan. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of the sacrifices that we do for His sake. And to make the sacrifices that we do for His sake, if they're not for His sake, to make them for His sake, to purify and correct our intentions, so that all that we do that is good is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may He accept from us, and may He bless us throughout our lives through these deeds. And may He allow us to continue to do so, and make the path easy for us, and make the path that leads to Jannah and to His pleasure. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. بسم الله الحمد لله وكفى ثم الصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تلا أما بعد. So my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, going back to the specific example of the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam, how was it that they all were able to sacrifice time and time again? It wasn't just one or the other, or one saying, why are you doing this? How are you doing this? Please don't do this. They all submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gave up whatever they needed to give up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to look at that family unit. What type of ties did they have? What type of relationship did they have? Ibrahim alayhi salam, as I mentioned, one of the greatest prophets, if not the greatest after our beloved Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And time again, he gave up whatever he needed to for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through these tests and trials and tribulations and sacrifices, it only makes one stronger. And it only brings one closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through this, he was able to lead by example. Be able to lead his family. He wouldn't just come and say that you guys have to do this while he's just sitting and not doing anything himself. His wife was able to sacrifice because she knew he was a messenger of Allah. His son was able to sacrifice because of everything he knows of his father and everything he learned from his father. So we, as individuals, we have to sacrifice, but it is always a joint effort. We are a community, we are one body, and especially within our families, if we do not lead by example, if we do not show that we sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for this world. If you sacrifice for this world, you can get the world. But we have to sacrifice for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to show this and lead this by example, and we have to keep this example within our families. We have to have our families centered around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and centered around righteousness. And we have to keep our ties strong, and we have to keep the love strong within our families. Otherwise, if somebody asks you to sacrifice, if you do not have respect for them, if you do not see them as a leader, if you do not see them as somebody close to you that you would listen to, that you would give your life up for, then you're not going to be willing to sacrifice for them. So by that same vein, we have to strengthen our ties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to strengthen our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only then can we truly sacrifice for Him and teach these lessons to our families, to our children, to our wives, to our husbands, to our parents, to our siblings, so that we can all sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we can all be from those who can be resurrected together with the rest of the Muslimin, with the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so that we can enter paradise together behind the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so that we can be together with our loved ones and with the messengers alayhimus salatu wassalam, and with their companions and with the righteous and the martyrs, because they are the best of companions. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us, to purify our hearts, to make our intentions sincere, to make us from those who lead by example for not just our families but for others as well. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who are righteous fathers and righteous mothers and righteous spouses and righteous children, and to make us from those who are good to their parents, and to make us from those who will sacrifice for our children, to make us from those who will sacrifice for our families, to make us from those who will sacrifice for our parents, to make us from those who do these sacrifices for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we ask that He keep us far away from the temptations of shaitan, and to forgive us for our sins and our shortcomings, which we do knowingly and unknowingly. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send His peace and blessings upon His beloved Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma la tada' lana fi maqamina hadha dhanban illa ghafartah, wa la hamman illa farajtah, wa la karban illa nafastah, wa la daynan illa qadaytah, wa la asiran illa yassartah, wa la mubtalan illa afaytah, wa la dallan illa hadaytah, ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا ميتا إلا رحمته ولا ولدا إلا أصلحته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة هي لك رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا أعنتنا على قضائها يا أكرم الأكرمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والكافرين ودمر أعداء الدين. اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين المظلومين في كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم أيدهم وتقبل شهداءهم يا رب العالمين. عباد الله رحمكم الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العلي يذكركم واشكروه على نعمه يزدكم ولذكر الله تعالى أكبر والله يعلم.